18. Aegis destroyers form a defensive ring around a critical supply convoy. China launches 340 anti-ship missiles in the largest convoy attack since World War II. In a 28-minute battle, the destroyers shoot down 327 missiles. 13 penetrate, sinking 4 cargo ships and killing 67 sailors, September 28, 2025. Western Pacific, 380 nautical miles east of Taiwan. At 5:17 a.m., a convoy of 32 commercial cargo ships carrying critical supplies from Japan to U.S. forces near Taiwan was crossing waters considered vulnerable to Chinese attack. The convoy, stretching across 15 nautical miles of ocean, carried ammunition, fuel, spare parts, and food, supplies that U.S. military operations depended upon. Without continuous resupply, American forces defending Taiwan would run critically short of essentials within 2 weeks. Protecting the convoy was Surface Action Group Echo, 18 Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyers specifically assigned to convoy escort duty. The ships formed a defensive ring with a 40 nautical mile diameter, positioning themselves between the convoy and likely Chinese missile launch positions. Each destroyer carried between 90 and 96 vertical launch cells loaded with SM-2, SM-6, and evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. Total defensive missile inventory across 18 ships, approximately 1,350 interceptors. The force represented the largest concentration of Aegis air defense capability ever assigned to convoy protection. At 5:45 a.m., radar operators aboard USS Milius detected massive electromagnetic activity from coastal China and Chinese naval vessels operating west of Taiwan. Within 90 seconds, the assessment was confirmed and transmitted across the task force. Ballistic and cruise missile launch detected. Estimated count 300-plus missiles inbound, multiple vectors, time to impact, 22-28 minutes depending on missile type. The convoy escort commander, Rear Admiral Jennifer Torres aboard USS Stetham, immediately activated the coordinated defense plan that had been rehearsed dozens of times but never executed in combat. The Chinese attack employed a calculated mix of weapons designed to overwhelm defenses through variety and numbers. 120 DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missiles launched from mobile launchers across Fujian province, targeting both the escort ships and high-value cargo vessels. 140 YJ-18 supersonic cruise missiles, fired from surface ships, submarines, and coastal batteries, approached at Mach 2.5 from multiple directions, and 80 CJ-10 subsonic cruise missiles added to the wave, their slower speed offset by sea-skimming profiles that made radar detection difficult. Total count 340 missiles converging on the convoy from ranges between 180 and 350 kilometers. At 5:47 a.m., Admiral Torres transmitted the engagement order to all 18 destroyers. Execute Plan Delta IV. Weapons free on all threats. Maintain formation integrity. Protect the convoy. The Aegis combat systems across all ships linked together, creating an integrated air defense network that would coordinate missile launches, share radar data, and prioritize threats to avoid wasting interceptors on targets already engaged by other ships. The system represented decades of development aimed at exactly this scenario, protecting high-value assets from saturation attacks. At 5:50 a.m., the outer defensive ring engaged. 6 destroyers positioned at the western edge of the formation closest to China fired 48 SM-6 advanced interceptors toward the ballistic missile threat at maximum range. The SM-6s, capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 250 kilometers and altitudes above 100,000 feet, climbed rapidly to intercept DF-21D warheads during their mid-course phase. Between 5:53 and 5:56 a.m., these missiles destroyed 32 ballistic missiles at altitudes between 80,000 and 60,000 feet, but 88 DF-21Ds continued descending toward the convoy. Should destroyers prioritize defending the convoy or themselves when facing saturation attacks? Type A for convoy first defense, Type B for ship survival priority. Comment your tactical reasoning. At 5:56 a.m., the middle defensive ring activated. 12 destroyers positioned around the convoy's perimeter fired 156 SM-2 Block 3B missiles toward the remaining ballistic missiles and the leading edge of the cruise missile wave. The SM-2s, with 90 nautical mile range and proven effectiveness against both aircraft and missiles, engaged targets at altitudes between 50,000 and 15,000 feet and ranges from 120 to 60 kilometers. Between 5:57 and 6:02 a.m., these interceptors achieved remarkable results. 54 more ballistic missiles destroyed, 72 cruise missiles eliminated, but 154 missiles remained inbound. 34 ballistic missiles now in terminal descent, and 120 cruise missiles at medium range. At 6:03 a.m., the ballistic missiles entered their terminal phase, descending at Mach 8 toward both destroyers and cargo ships. The Aegis systems, using complex algorithms to predict impact points, assigned each ballistic missile to specific ships for engagement. At 6:04 a.m., 64 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles fired from multiple destroyers, targeting the ballistic threats at ranges between 25 and 8 kilometers. The ESSMs, highly maneuverable missiles designed for terminal defense, intercepted 26 DF-21Ds between 6:05 and 6:07 a.m., but 8 ballistic missiles penetrated this defensive layer. At 6:07 a.m., rolling airframe missile systems across the destroyer formation engaged the remaining ballistic threats. 84 RAM missiles launched, their infrared seekers tracking the heat signatures of descending warheads. 7 ballistic missiles were destroyed at ranges under 3 kilometers and altitudes below 2,000 feet, but 1 DF-21D penetrated all defensive layers. At 6:07 and 47 seconds, the warhead struck the cargo ship Maersk Detroit, a container vessel carrying ammunition and spare parts. The 500-kilogram warhead detonated on impact, triggering secondary explosions as ammunition stores cooked off. The ship, engulfed in fire and suffering catastrophic structural damage, began sinking. 23 crew members were killed. The remaining 47 abandoned ship successfully. Subscribe to Navy Mission now for the most detailed convoy defense operations coverage. This is analysis that reveals modern naval protection capabilities. While the ballistic missile engagement concluded, 120 cruise missiles, 68 supersonic YJ-18s, and 52 subsonic CJ-10s continued approaching the convoy from multiple directions. At 6:08 a.m., these threats were at ranges between 80 and 40 kilometers. The destroyers had expended significant portions of their SM-6 and SM-2 inventories, but retained substantial ESSM stocks and full close-in defense capabilities. At 6:09 a.m., the 18 destroyers fired 144 ESSM missiles in coordinated salvos. The ESSMs engaged the cruise missile wave at ranges between 35 and 12 kilometers. Between 6:10 and 6:13 a.m., they destroyed 96 missiles, 54 YJ-18s, and 42 CJ-10s. The intercept rate was extraordinary, but 24 cruise missiles penetrated and continued toward their targets. At 6:13 a.m., with cruise missiles now within 8 kilometers, the Phalanx close-in weapon systems activated across the destroyer formation. 18 Phalanx guns, firing at 4,500 rounds per minute each, created walls of tungsten-depleted uranium rounds between the missiles and their targets. Between 6:13 and 6:15 a.m., the Phalanx systems destroyed 12 cruise missiles at ranges between 2,000 and 400 meters. The guns' radar-guided fire control systems tracked, prioritized, and engaged targets with computational precision impossible for human operators. But 12 missiles evaded even this final defensive layer. At 6:15 a.m., they struck their targets. Three YJ-18 supersonic missiles hit the cargo ship Evergreen Harmony, a massive container vessel carrying fuel bladders and vehicle spare parts. The supersonic impacts, each delivering kinetic energy equivalent to tons of TNT before warheads detonated, devastated the ship's midsection. Fire spread rapidly through cargo holds containing fuel. The crew, recognizing the ship was lost, abandoned via lifeboats. Evergreen Harmony burned for 6 hours before sinking. 18 crew members were killed by the initial impacts or subsequent fires. 43 survived. Two CJ-10 subsonic missiles struck the tanker Pacific Guardian, carrying aviation fuel. The missiles penetrated the ship's side and detonated in fuel tanks, creating massive explosions that broke the tanker's back. The ship, laden with thousands of tons of flammable liquid, became an inferno. The captain ordered immediate abandon ship. 14 crew members were killed, unable to reach life-saving equipment before explosions cut off escape routes. 28 survived, rescued by destroyer helicopters within an hour. 4 more cruise missiles, 3 YJ-18s and 1 CJ-10, struck the cargo vessel Atlantic Trader, carrying ammunition and artillery shells. The first missile's impact detonated the cargo, causing a catastrophic explosion that vaporized the forward third of the ship. The vessel, carrying over 2,000 tons of high explosives, disintegrated in a blast visible from 40 miles away. All 38 crew members were killed instantly. The explosion was so powerful that destroyers 15 kilometers away reported pressure waves and debris impacts. 3 cruise missiles targeted destroyers rather than cargo ships. USS John S. McCain was struck by one YJ-18 that hit the superstructure, destroying the ship's SPY radar and killing 12 sailors. The destroyer, severely damaged but with hull integrity intact, could no longer effectively engage targets and withdrew from formation under her own power. 2 more missiles targeted USS Fitzgerald, but were destroyed by the ship's Phalanx at the last moment. Debris from the exploding missiles causing minor damage and 3 injuries. By 6:16 a.m., the engagement was over. 340 Chinese missiles had attacked the convoy and its escort. 327 had been destroyed by layered defenses, a 96.2% intercept rate, but 13 missiles had penetrated. 4 cargo ships were sunk: Maersk Detroit, Evergreen Harmony, Pacific Guardian, and Atlantic Trader. 1 destroyer was severely damaged. Total casualties: 67 sailors and merchant mariners killed, 94 wounded. The convoy, despite losses, continued toward Taiwan, with 28 surviving cargo ships still carrying critical supplies. Do you think losing 4 of 32 ships represents successful convoy defense or unacceptable losses? Share your assessment in the comments. For the 18 destroyers that had defended the convoy, September 28th represented the most intense air defense engagement any had experienced. They had fired 412 defensive missiles, approximately 25% of their total inventory, in under 30 minutes. Some ships had expended over half their VLS cells. All required immediate resupply before they could conduct further operations. The convoy defense had succeeded in protecting the majority of cargo ships, but the ammunition expenditure meant the destroyers needed replenishment themselves. For China, the attack achieved mixed results. 4 American cargo ships were sunk, disrupting supply chains and demonstrating vulnerability of maritime logistics. But 340 missiles had destroyed only 4 of 32 targets, a 12.5% success rate against defended convoys. The cost-exchange ratio was unfavorable. 340 missiles worth approximately $1.7 billion had sunk ships and cargo worth perhaps $400 million. More importantly, 28 cargo ships reached Taiwan, delivering the supplies American forces needed to continue operations. For the merchant mariners who died, September 28th was a stark reminder that civilian sailors face combat risks when supporting military operations. The crews of Maersk Detroit, Evergreen Harmony, Pacific Guardian, and Atlantic Trader had been sailing under contract to support U.S. forces. They died not from accidents or storms, but from deliberate military attack. Their families received compensation and recognition, but for many, the distinction between civilian and military casualties felt meaningless. The mariners had served their nations and paid with their lives. The surviving cargo ships reached Taiwan over the following 3 days, unloading supplies that would sustain American military operations for another month. New convoys were already being assembled, though routes and escort procedures were modified based on September 28th's lessons. Future convoys would require even larger escort forces, more defensive missiles, and potentially air cover from carrier-based fighters. The cost and complexity of maintaining sea lines of communication in contested waters had increased dramatically. For the 18 destroyers, the operation validated their design purpose. Arleigh Burke-class ships had been built specifically to provide air defense for high-value assets against overwhelming threats. On September 28th, they had executed that mission, absorbing a saturation attack that would have annihilated an undefended convoy. The 96.2% intercept rate represented extraordinary performance, but the 3.8% that penetrated had killed 67 people and sunk 4 ships, demonstrating that even the best defenses couldn't guarantee perfect protection. As the sun set on September 28th, 4 ships rested on the ocean floor. Debris and oil slicks marked their locations. The convoy continued east, smoke from damaged but surviving vessels visible for miles, and the destroyers, their magazines depleted, their crews exhausted, maintained watch over the cargo ships they had defended. The battle had been won, but the war for sea control continued, and every convoy crossing these contested waters would face similar threats, requiring similar sacrifices to ensure supplies reached their destinations. Now I want 3 perspectives from you. First, does a 96.2% intercept rate represent adequate convoy defense, or should standards be higher? Second, what does this engagement reveal about the viability of maritime logistics in high-threat environments? Third, should merchant mariners be treated as combatants when sailing in support of military operations? Comment your detailed strategic and ethical analysis below. Your insights drive the conversations we have on Navy Mission. And if this breakdown of the largest convoy defense engagement in modern history gave you new understanding of protected logistics operations, prove it by hitting that like button, subscribing to Navy Mission, and turning on notifications. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay protected, and remember that supplies win wars, but only if they reach their destinations.